Good afternoon, everybody. My name's City Council Anthony Coghill. I represent the 4th District, and we're here to discuss the Wilkinsburg annexation. One of, I hope, will be many meetings coming up. We have a lot of information to share today, so I'm going to try to move it along. It's already been a long day for most of us, and many discussions, but most of you are familiar with my Democratic committee. I'm going to try to run it like this. We're going to hear from some people first. I would like to first start with our county executive, Rich Fitzgerald, and I really am just asking for his insight and why he believes this is a good idea. And we're also going to hear from a few others, and we're going to get the financial report. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you. Thank Mr. Councilman Coghill and all the members of council for being part of this. And really, the fact is, had we been here 10 years ago, I don't know that anybody wanted to join the city of Pittsburgh where we were 10 years ago. And I think it's a credit to the work that this council has been doing with various administrations over this last decade, that a lot of vibrancy, a lot of increased property values, increased economic activity, increased young people that are moving into the city. It's desirable. And I think it's to the credit that you bring, that this community, the community of Wilkinsburg, has had a petition that they want to put a question on the ballot to actually join the city of Pittsburgh. So I think, again, that's a testament to the folks sitting around this table. I also think if you look at that last decade, you have seen the city of Pittsburgh kind of go this way, but the borough of Wilkinsburg, unfortunately, has gone the other way. We've seen of the 130 municipalities in Allegheny County, their population loss has been at the top of that list, or the bottom of the list, if you will. People have been leaving for various reasons. As somebody whose job is to really focus on economic development, I can tell you we can get a lot of economic development in the city right up to the line, whether it's in Homewood, Lincoln, Leamington, Park Place, Regent Square, North Point Breeze, many of the communities that abut the borough of Wilkinsburg. We know the vibrancy along the East Busway, the Martin Luther King Busway, and what we've seen happen in East Liberty and Larimer and places like that. But when in going over to Wilkinsburg, once the developers, once the property owners, the potential investors see the millage, it becomes a deal breaker. And I think the property values of Wilkinsburg have reflected that. And we feel that this is in the best interest of, certainly for the folks of Wilkinsburg, but also the best interest of the city of Pittsburgh as the city of Pittsburgh grows. I say that not just as a county executive, but as somebody who grew up and continues to live in the city and loves to see the great things that are happening right now. So we know that over 200 businesses have left Wilkinsburg in the last couple of decades. And again, I mentioned the population loss. So I know our solicitor, the county solicitor, and we're obviously in charge of running elections, including obviously referendums, to make sure the legalities are what they need to be to get a question on the ballot, and proper code, the second-class city code and second-class county codes that we all live with our friends in Harrisburg have enacted over the years. So we feel very confident that this is something that can really move forward as we look at this over the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive. And before we move on, I just want to say one thing for the public's sake. This meeting has taken on a completely different tone than it would have last week, through lots of meetings and lots of collaboration between the county executive and Reverend Burgess and our leadership and other council members have been talking about. So, all the emotional pleas are set aside for now, and this is strictly fact-finding information. And I want to introduce Tracy Evans, who is the Wilkinsburg CDC. And I will say this personally to you, Tracy, you have been heroic through this. You have been brave. You have pushed and pushed, and you know what? Your effort's going to pay off. I think we might not get the marriage that others were looking for this year, but we certainly have an engagement until then. So with that, I want to turn it over to Mr. Andrew Zeffie, County Solicitor. And Andrew, if you would just give us the rundown quickly, if you could, the difference between merger and annexation and where we're at.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for having me. I think that Reverend Burgess actually laid it out pretty well in his remarks before today's meeting, that there's basically two ways that municipalities can merge, come together in the state of Pennsylvania. One is through what's generally referred to the Mergers and Consolidation Act. And that's where two different municipalities can take referendum votes in their own jurisdictions vote yes or no to the merger. If they both vote yes, they do. That state law specifically excludes first and second class cities, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, as municipalities in the definition of municipality. So that leaves the only option, and it is the only option, with the Annexation Act of 1903. So that has a slightly different process. It has the one you've all become familiar with over here in the last few months. Petitions are gathered. If you meet statutory requirements, they go to court. Court notifies council. Council has 90 days to vote up or down. If they vote up, it goes to a referendum of the municipality to be annexed, in this case, Wilkinsburg. So it's a pretty straightforward process. And like I said, the big picture here is that is the only option that the city has to go through this.
Great. I'm going to ask for one more person to comment. Michael Rose, where you at? This guy has been very instrumental in this whole process. I think you bring a lot to the table and your views on this. And I just want the council to hear you if you could in just 2 minutes, okay?
Yes, thank you. This is a great day for democracy. This is a great day for the people of both Wilkinsburg and Pittsburgh as we continue to strengthen our bond into one community. I want to thank Tracy Evans, the members of the WCDC, Wilkinsburg Action Committee, and many more people, including County Executive Rich Fitzgerald, Councilman Burgess, and Kyle Kill for their leadership in this process and coming to a brilliant compromise. This deadline will both allow us to make this process as painless as possible and gives us the crucial time to do outreach to members of both communities as to why this is such a win-win. The city will receive two practically brand new elementary schools with $16 million in new state-of-the-art renovations. And best, the city will receive a much-needed infusion of new blood. 15,000 people into its census, which I believe will soon be 30,000, as people see the advantages of Wilkinsburg offers in both its convenient proximity to both downtown and shopping districts in Monroeville, ease of access to the I-376 highway and Port Authority bus line. They'll appreciate our charming classic red and gold and brick roads and its thousands of beautiful all-brick American four squares. Anyone in real estate knows that they don't make houses like they make in Wilkinsburg anymore. Subsequently, this influx of citizens will lead to more federal funding for programs for working class people. In return, Wilkinsburg homeowners will have their home taxes cut in half, averaging about $2,700 a year. Renters will save $200 a year in garbage collection fees alone, as well as greater access to programs providing interest-free loans so that they can have their share of the American dream if they so choose. Everyone knows the greatest enemy to gentrification is homeownership. No one can force you from land that has your name on it. And I'm so very proud and happy to hear that this process is going forward with that in mind. Last, our Wilkinsburg youth will have access to year-round youth programs, which will build thousands of healthy young bodies and minds. This is just the beginning of an exciting new chapter as Wilkinsburg transitions from small town to the heart of a great city. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. I just want to note, Wilkinsburg is the size of Brookline, basically 15,000 residents, just so everybody has that concept. I think some people think Wilkinsburg is this enormous place, but it really isn't. So with that, and with the new spirit here at the table, I would say, let's start getting into the information. We have two people here, HR and A. We have Alex Stokes to present us with the municipality / school district, numbers. And we also have Dean Kaplan from PFM. So I'm not sure who you want to go first, but let's start with I guess it was HR and A with Alex Stokes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Kate Whittles, a partner at HRNA, and going to be presenting the information. Alex has joined me on Zoom. Hopefully you can see us and see him. I will now share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, great. Well, thank you again. And it's great to hear the collaborative spirit that is going on in the room today. We were hired by Wilkinsburg CDC to better understand the opportunities and constraints of a merger, both for the residents of Wilkinsburg and the city of Pittsburgh. We were engaged in December 2018, and much of the analysis we are going to be presenting today was completed in 2019 and 2020. As we have seen from our work with municipalities across the country, decentralization can lead to a less efficient government. And with smaller municipalities duplicating services, and competition for resources are constrained, and the ability to tackle systematic regional issues happens, thus preventing equitable and inclusive growth. This is an issue that is happening in the Pittsburgh MSA and in Allegheny County especially. So Allegheny County is made up of 130 municipalities, the most amount of municipalities in the state of Pennsylvania. Wilkinsburg is just one of those counties. And as you said earlier, it's only 15,000 people. But with that, it brings, 5% could increase Pittsburgh's population by 5%. Regional divisions, such as the one that exists in Allegheny County, are problematic for cities and suburbs alike. Government efficiency is constrained and public services are more limited, which means that services are more expensive on a per capita basis, and the quality of the public service cannot meet the needs of the residents. With the city of Pittsburgh only representing 13% of the MSA, achieving regional growth and implementing a united and broad vision can be slowed when economic development departments and public services are only focused on a sliver of the region. The more the region is sliced into tiny municipalities, the less coordination there can be in growing the region. And this can have a real impact when competing for state and federal dollars, as the bigger cities qualify for higher thresholds and more funding. Funding applications for sources like CDBG money and ARPA money are more competitive when they are representing larger populations. From a federal funding perspective, the city of Pittsburgh would be stronger and more competitive if more of the smaller municipalities like Wilkinsburg were part of the city. A conversation of a merger is not out of the blue. You have been talking about this and acting on it for 15 years. Whether it's from garbage collection, fire protection, and public services, public schools in terms of middle and high schools have merged successfully, resulting in improved services for the residents of Wilkinsburg without a negative impact on the residents of Pittsburgh. These prior consolidations have proven that a merger can be a win-win for both Pittsburgh and Wilkinsburg. Public officials within Wilkinsburg are making a valiant effort, but the structural challenges will continue to constrain their ability to serve the residents of Wilkinsburg as the tax base, which is a 50% source of their funding, continues to decline. Residents of Wilkinsburg are voting with their feet, and the borough has already lost 4,000 residents since 2000. Wilkinsburg is especially losing its Black population, which has declined by 20% since 2010. A major reason is the property tax rates in Wilkinsburg are 2 times what they are in Pittsburgh. This deters private investment, and with a dwindling tax base, the borough has less and less money to address quality of life issues. On the revenue side, the underlying property tax revenue will remain stagnant without either growth in population or an increase in the tax rate. Property taxes have remained flat since 2014, and the limited growth in property taxes is really a result in delinquent tax collection rather than in actual property growth. On the expenditure side, Wilkinsburg's expenditures will continue to increase with inflation. Without a change to its fiscal structure, the borough will continue to ask its police and teachers and public servants to do more with less. Absent a change in fiscal structure, the borough will run out of money by 2028, And this is simply a factor of expenditures as a result of inflation growing faster than the tax base. Without a structural change, such as a merger, a vicious cycle will continue where more and more residents will continue to leave, thus further depressing the borough's ability to support the residents left behind. Furthermore, the merger of 2 municipalities will create a fairer tax burden for Wilkinsburg residents, both reducing property taxes and unlocking value that can be reinvested. Consolidating Wilkinsburg and Pittsburgh would generate benefits for residents of both jurisdictions. There are cost efficiencies, and revenue rebalancing will likely generate a modest fiscal surplus for the city of Pittsburgh. Revenue rebalancing would also reduce Wilkinsburg's regionally high property tax rate to Pittsburgh, which would relieve inequitable property tax burden for the majority minority residents and unlock neighborhood reinvestment. Wilkinsburg's underutilized downtown could also serve as an expansion for Pittsburgh's growth, as Rich Fitzgerald alluded to. And this could generate job opportunities for residents of Wilkinsburg and the city of Pittsburgh. So the city of Pittsburgh and its residents stand to benefit substantially from a merger with the borough of Wilkinsburg. You'll be able to add population, which is something Pittsburgh hasn't been growing as fast as we all think it should. This will allow for potentially qualifying for more state and federal aid. It will increase the political clout of the city of Pittsburgh, and it will provide for a higher regional and national profile. It will also increase economic development opportunity. A connected district can allow for regional planning and capturing growth within the city of Pittsburgh. So, and improving regional coordination will streamline administration of the region's core, enhancing Pittsburgh's regional leadership, and could foster greater consolidation. As the residents of Wilkinsburg have been considering a merger, they also are recognizing that there could be impacts from growth on certain populations. And they're really committed to looking at how do we instill inclusive policies that will promote inclusive growth. Some of those policies that they're studying, considering, really are anchored around 3 critical points: how to support existing companies and making sure they can remain and benefit from the growth that will occur from a merger; protecting residents and workers who are most at risk of displacement by building and preserving naturally occurring affordable housing and low-cost commercial real estate that exists today; and providing lasting benefits to existing residents through targeted support for infrastructure. Overall, a merger will benefit both the borough of Wilkinsburg and the residents of Pittsburgh, and will provide for greater opportunity for growth for the overall region. Thank you for your time. I'm now going to hand it over, I think, to Dean Kaplan from PFM.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Councilman, for having us here today. My colleague Ian Tyson will be working on the slides here. I think hopefully everyone can see our presentation. If you'd like to go to the first slide, Ian. Public Financial Management, PFM, as many of you know, has been involved in Pittsburgh for some years. During the state oversight period, PFM was the Act 47 Recovery Coordinator for Pittsburgh, and subsequently has worked with the Wilkinsburg School District under the auspices of the Department of Education on their financial review. So in this particular case, we were asked to build on the work that HRNA initiated and look at the specific impact on the city and the borough and the 2 school districts of a proposed merger. We focus most of our attention on specifically on finances and operations, using existing financial documents and other publicly available information on the finances of both governments, both municipal governments and both districts, and where possible supplemented that with discussions with stakeholders and officials of the various entities. Our work was really focused on providing the financial information that will allow all parties to engage in database discussions of the merger, and now is, of course, particularly apt as we enter this next year-long period of working through some of the details, as several of the previous speakers have mentioned. In performing our work, we made several assumptions about factors related to the merger in order to provide meaningful estimates of its financial impact. And we've described those throughout the detailed reports that underlie this presentation, and we'll mention some of those today. But it's important to note that those are the areas where we think that the various parties should focus over this coming year in working out the day-to-day details of how the merger arrangement will work. Let me ask my colleagues, Gordon Mann and Ian Tyson, to speak about the specific pieces of this. Gordon, some of you know, was the Act 47 coordinator for Pittsburgh for many years and led our analysis of the municipal aspects of the merger. And Ian Tyson is a colleague who works with K through 12 school districts around the country and has participated in a review of a number of boundary changes of school districts throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So with that, let me hand off to Gordon for the discussion of the municipal slides.
Thanks very much, Dean. So nice to be with you all this afternoon. And as Dean said, what we did is we were brought in to look at the financial impact on really the city of Pittsburgh as a government, right? From a merger. There's two sides to this. The city will gain, we've talked about tax base will gain residents, and with that comes revenue, the income tax, the real estate tax, the other revenue generating activities that are in Wilkinsburg that would become part of Pittsburgh city government. Pittsburgh will also spend more, right? Because it will provide services to a larger geographic area. In some cases, services the city's already providing. So trash and fire, there's no additional cost to that because the city's already doing that. But police and planning and code and some of those other areas. The punchline here for those who aren't super detail oriented in terms of numbers is based on the 2021 budget figures in our analysis, we did a high point estimate and a low point estimate. And the reason we did that is we're in the middle of a pandemic. And what you have in terms of financial impact depends in large part on how soon do you assume the economy bounces back, right? But if we take the midpoint of that high and low estimate for the city, it's a very, very small net deficit to the city and one that's probably easily correctable in the short term as you work through the assumptions. In fact, I went back on in preparation for this and reran a portion of our analysis from 2021, and not by doing anything, just by virtue of the economy improving a little bit and tax collection rates improving a little bit, the deficit basically cut itself in half in a year, right? And over time, it's likely and certainly more than possible that adding Wilkinsburg actually becomes a net positive to Pittsburgh just from purely a balance sheet financial perspective, right? So let's dig into that a little bit. Go to the next slide, Ian. Thanks. So what happens on the revenue side? In essence, it's two things. Right now, the borough pays for trash service and pays for fire service, and that's about $3 million a year. And that would go away, right? If Pittsburgh residents don't pay that municipal service fee, Wilkinsburg as residents would not pay that fee. What they would pay would be the Pittsburgh taxes, the real estate tax, the earned income tax. If you were a business in Wilkinsburg, you would stop paying the business privilege tax and the mercantile tax, and you would start paying the payroll preparation tax. Some of the other taxes are already there. The tax rates are pretty much similar between Pittsburgh and Wilkinsburg. The big change, as was alluded to earlier, is if you're a resident, you're going to pay less in real estate taxes and more in income taxes, but to a net benefit. If you're a renter, you don't pay real estate taxes. You would have a change in your earned income tax bill, but potentially an offsetting charge for municipal trash service. And for the city, what it means is you come out of this with about a net gain of about $7 million. So as net of the fee that wouldn't be paid anymore. So that's on the revenue side. So that's $7 to $10 million. 7 is the low estimate. So on the expenditure side, we looked at the borough's services and we made our best estimate and projection of what would slide over, right? Right now, Wilkinsburg has, depending on the budget you look at, 22 or 23 police officers. We assume all of those move over to the city. 3 or 4 code employees, we assume all of those move over to the city. So we're not assuming any kind of reduction in frontline staff. Now, the reality is Pittsburgh's police department is obviously much bigger. They could provide additional coverage and additional services, and I'm sure the union representatives will touch on that in a little bit. They could provide services that just as a larger force, Wilkinsburg can't provide on its own. But we're not building that any kind of potential efficiency or increase in service force into this. This is just with the assumption of you slide the bodies over and they become city employees. And you can see again, the net cost here, the low end estimate is $7.7 million. That's with some economies of scale. So what's that mean? Wilkinsburg contracts out for a lot of legal services, for its engineer, for tax collection. These are all things that theoretically the city may be able to take on its own, and you get a lower net cost overall. Let's go to the next slide. You're not going to get out of a conversation with PFM without us talking to you about your legacy costs, right? Those of you who went through the Act 47 process with us knew this was coming. And we saw the questions and have heard the questions, and you're right to ask them. And I'm glad you obviously haven't forgotten the conversations that we had over 15 years. City needs to be mindful of its debt. City needs to be mindful of its pension obligations, and the city needs to be mindful of its retiree healthcare obligations. The good news here is for Wilkinsburg, it actually works out. Wilkinsburg's debt is somewhere, it's less than $1 million this year. It was less than $1 million last year. And relative to the city's total debt, it's a very, very low percentage. Pensions, the story's even better. The net contribution from the borough to its pension fund net of the state aid is less than $200,000. Someone had asked me the question, will this hurt Pittsburgh's funding ratio? Wilkinsburg's funding ratio was 91%. Okay, Pittsburgh's is 57, so no is the answer. And the last part on the retiree health insurance, there are some retired police officers, as best we can tell from the budget, who receive retiree health insurance, but there aren't retired firefighters receiving that because the borough doesn't have those firefighters anymore. You've already absorbed some of those costs by virtue of the cooperation that you've had over time. And again, whatever liability the borough has, and there is one, there are retired employees with health insurance, it's extremely minor and a very, very small percentage relative to the city. So it's good to be vigilant about it. It's good to ask these questions. In our opinion, Wilkinsburg's obligations will not have a material impact on the city in these areas. Ian, I'll let you take over and discuss the school district.
Thanks, Gordon, and thanks, Dean, for the introduction. Similar to the analysis on the municipal side, we took a look at the range of revenues and expenditures for the merger of Wilkinsburg School District and the Pittsburgh Public Schools. The punchline, like Gordon said, is that in general here, when you take the midpoint of our analysis, we're looking at a slight positive surplus of about $600,000, which equates to a little bit less than 1% of the Pittsburgh Public Schools overall budget. Now, the merger of the two school districts will also come with a substantial amount of one-time revenues. We're looking at a net impact of about $10 million, which we'll get into over the next couple of slides, that would come along with the merger. So in the event that there's extreme variability between the revenues and the expenditures, there will be that one-time revenue there that will be able to smooth that transition over time. And I think our conclusion on the school district side is that it's similar to the municipal merger, in that in the long run, this is probably a net positive for the Pittsburgh Public Schools. Now, on the revenue side, it's a little bit different than the municipality because of the funding from the state that supports public schools. For local taxes, we're looking at about 30 to 40% coming from the property tax, earned income tax, and other minor sources. And we'll get into the variability in a little bit on the next couple of slides. The state aid we expect to remain relatively flat because of the makeup of the Wilkinsburg students, and then adding those into the funding formula and the impact on Pittsburgh, we see a relatively stable impact across the low and the high impact scenarios here. And then federal funding is fairly stable across the two. And between the two scenarios, we're looking at about $27 to $31 million in recurring revenue to support the school district operations. Now, for the one-time revenue, I mentioned $10 million on the previous slide. The gross amount with the one-time revenue from fund balance, capital project funds, and then the pandemic relief funds from the federal government amount to $17 million. On the local sources, the variability are coming from the real estate tax and the earned income tax, with the changes in the real estate tax coming from the collection rate assumptions for the Wilkinsburg School District or the Pittsburgh Public Schools. And then on the earned income tax, like Gordon said, we're in the middle of a pandemic here. So the variability is coming from the tax base that is generating the revenues for the earned income tax. I mentioned that the student population we expect to remain relatively stable in Wilkinsburg with a similar demographics over time. So we're assuming that the $3 million that came to support the transition of secondary students over to Pittsburgh Public Schools will remain the same, with some caveats here that may get revisited depending on how those Wilkinsburg students impact the Pittsburgh Public Schools. On the flip side, if that does occur, the addition of those students would generate additional revenues for the school district through the funding formula. But here we just wanted to note that those are two considerations that we made in the analysis. On the expenditure side, almost 2/3 of the budget is coming from salaries, benefits for the teachers that are in the two elementary schools in Wilkinsburg, and then for charter school tuition for those students who are attending other schools in the region. Now, the variability is coming from mostly on the charter school tuition side, and for the salaries and benefits, like in the municipal merger, we're assuming that all the teachers and building level staff, the administrators and the clerks running the buildings, those will move over to the Pittsburgh Public Schools and be paid at rates similar to other staff in Pittsburgh Public Schools. For the charter school tuition, we'll get into that on the next slide. And in terms of the overall spending to support the operations, we're assuming that the total expenditures will range somewhere between $27 million and a little bit under $31 million in the high end. Now, the key assumptions here on the expenditure side are coming from the share of students who are attending charter schools. The high end is showing that the current amount would remain the same as they are today in Wilkinsburg schools. And after the merger, in the low end scenario, the assumption is that that enrollment number may go back down towards the Pittsburgh Public Schools average. We're assuming economies of scale on the operational side with savings for administrative services and central office staff that are offsetting some of those costs that are in that $27 to $31 million. And that the cost of educating those students who are currently at Westinghouse and other schools in Pittsburgh Public Schools would remain the same. In terms of legacy costs, like Gordon mentioned, both school districts are in the school retirement, the PSER system. So there would be no change in the benefits there. That's across all school districts. So there's no difference in liability there. It's just based on the payroll size and the annual payments that you're seeing. And we've adjusted for that in our analysis. And in terms of the debt payments that the district would take on in Pittsburgh Public Schools, we see in the district's debt service schedule that it will remain flat at about $1.3 million for the next 12 years. Now, for the one-time funds to offset that $17 million, our analysis is assuming that a portion of that is going to support upgrades at the district's elementary school, Turner Intermediate School, and take care of some of the costs there, and that there's also an amount left over to cover some of the one-time transition costs for unemployment for those furloughed administrative employees. And that would leave about $11 million in one-time funds to support the transition. With that, we come to the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan, Mr. Mann, and Ms. Whittles. Appreciate that. Packed full with information, but we could take a deep breath because we're not on the time frame deciding on this on Tuesday at this point. So I'm sure council has a lot of questions. A lot of questions will arise from the information that they've given, but we plan to meet throughout the year to really, analyze and, decide what direction we're going to go. Before we get into questions for council, I just want to hear from our police union president, Mr. Schwartzwelder, as to how he sees this would go. Bob, are you here? Come on up, just come on up to the podium there, please. Yeah. We spoke briefly about it, but I just wanted you to fill in information.
What I know about it so far?
Yeah. Before you begin, I wanted to say, Mr. Kaplan, Mr. Mann, Ms. Whittles, can we get hard copies to all council members as to the information that you just put up on the screen? So, we can have moving forward.
Certainly.
Okay.
Mr. Coghill, where do you want me to start at, sir?
You can start wherever you want to start. How do you see this? How do you see it merging?
Council, thanks for inviting me, Mr. Coghill, especially. The merger wouldn't be an issue for the police side because first of all, I know the majority of the Wilkinsburg police officers are a excellent group of officers. They work very similar to city police officers. They're faced with a lot of very, very difficult crime, a lot of public service related issues as well as we are. I think they're very bright. And for us to bring them on, we already have a system in place. When Ralph talks, the president of Firefighters Union, he could tell how they did it for the fire department. But it's just a matter of crunching numbers as far as their pension and their seniority-based issues would come over, because we bring people back that have left the force before, and we call it a break in service. And so what happens is when someone comes back to the Pittsburgh Police Department after having had left, they simply pay into the pension system to pay their years of service that they had in the pension previously. And then they're able to assume those years of service because their pension is fully funded. So that wouldn't be an issue for the police force. I think as a quality of officer, they're going to be able to match our quality of officers based on their size, because crime is relative and size of police forces are relative to the size of the community. So for Wilkinsburg, I was a borough police officer. I'm a born and raised city resident. I lived there all my life. When I first come out of the Army, before I got on with the City of Pittsburgh Police Department, I worked as a Coriopolis police officer for nearly 5 years. When I came over here from Coriopolis, I didn't change the way I policed. I just had more of it. So, but I also had a lot more help because I had a lot of officers that were showing up on my calls where it might just be me and my partner in Coriopolis. Then I had 8, 10, 12, 13 officers showing up on a difficult call. So the transition isn't that very isn't going to be difficult for those Wilkinsburg police officers, especially I also used to work in Zone 5 and I used to work very closely with the Wilkinsburg police officers right on the border. So I don't see that as an issue at all. The only two things you'd have to work out is just a seniority issue and a pension issue, which Mr. Lamb can speak to that. And also Ralph can speak to that as well. It's not a difficult problem.
That's great. Oh, good. I'm sorry.
What council needs to be aware of is you have a serious crisis in policing that's going to crush you very, very soon. So if you can absorb those Wilkinsburg police officers, I would say to do so faster now than before, because if you think about it, I have 267 police officers that can walk out tomorrow. They can retire. We have roughly 879 police officers in the rank and file. Of that 879, 571 of them have less than 9 years. Of that 571, 364 have less than 5. So you have a serious problem. You have 267 that can leave tomorrow, and you have nobody ready to be hired yet in the city of Pittsburgh. So if those 267 say, hey, I want to take my pension in the morning, you can't hire enough police officers fast enough to fill those ranks. Unlike the big crisis in 93, when they did the 3/4 pension, you had a lot of officers that they were bringing in because Pittsburgh had a lot to offer. And I'm not complaining to council. So I see Mr. Burgess already giving me the look. But when you pay the way you pay, you're having very, very difficult times right now recruiting. So you got to figure out how you're going to handle those numbers, and Wilkinsburg is a start.
That's great, Bob.
I'm
Thank you.
open to any questions.
Well, we're going to do that in the, in a little bit. Just want to hear from a couple more people. I didn't realize you were a lifelong Wilkinsburg resident. That's interesting.
Actually, not lifelong Wilkinsburg,
Okay,
city
well,
resident.
Yeah, right,
City.
right.
City of Pittsburgh, North Sider.
Right.
Bobby
those-
Wilson's my councilman.
To those numbers about the police officers diminishing in the city of Pittsburgh, we've had that conversation. Commander
Yes.
has, this council is going to have that conversation very shortly. I know because it's at a dangerously low level and we have no recruiting class. So
Correct.
thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Now let's get Mr. Ralph Sikora up here, somebody who actually did merge with Wilkinsburg.
And I'll
and
just wait back here,
departments.
Anthony, until you're ready. Just want me to wait?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, yep.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, Ralph.
How do you want me to start? Just tell you about what
Yeah,
we did?
just give us the experience as to how you joined and, what complications there were and how's it going now, basically. But please state your name and your neighborhood.
Ralph Sikora. I live in the Banksville section of the city of Pittsburgh. Council President Teresa Sakell Smith, my council person. So this process had started with, I believe it was Wilkinsburg had initiated a discussion with the city of Pittsburgh of wanting to contract services for fire. What the best part about it is that there were a seat at the table for all both bargaining units to sit down representing the employees with both sides of management in order to try to work to a mutual agreement on the goal. And the Wilkinsburg management wanted to ensure that their employees were taken care of properly and ensure that they had the protections they need. The city of Pittsburgh was also receptive to make sure that they were taken care of when they came over. And one of the unique things we did was we started them out at a third-year firefighter pay. So it wasn't, they were starting at the very beginning of their career. These firefighters came over, they were already highly trained and had many years of experience fighting fires in a very difficult area in Wilkinsburg, which has a high fire load over in that area. Now, the seniority issue for our group, they did start at the bottom of the seniority rung, but that was our decision between our groups. I think each different bargaining group needs to have an opportunity to speak because each one has some unique things. So this is just a basis for what was good for all of us. When it came to vacation and longevity issues, they were granted a 2-year jump start on those things so they wouldn't have to, again, start from scratch. The most significant side of this was the pension side. And the value, after the actuaries looked at everything, they were granted 54% of the years of service that they had in Wilkinsburg going towards Pittsburgh. applied towards Pittsburgh, and those revenues were brought over to cover those costs. That may not be the case in all other bargaining, so don't get fixated on that. The actuaries need to look at those things and put a cost to it and justify what that value will be. I will disagree with one thing that was stated about the pension fund. We are at 74% funding. He was missing the parking asset, which is significant, so let's not forget that. But I think that as you're going through all this and discussing it, remember that pension component has its own unique characteristics that may be different than what the municipal annexation laws are there for. In order to make sure that that happens, you would be in sense closing out a pension plan that has its own unique issues that have to be dealt with. But then you have retirees in both ends that have to be looked at, whether it's prior fire employees that are still being handled in Wilkinsburg or other employees that are still existing in a retirement. Somebody has to oversee them. It could very well be possible for that to be managed through the pension boards that we have here in the city of Pittsburgh. But those are some unique things that need to be discussed with those different entities here. Hope that helps you.
It does. It does a great deal. It's good to hear it. So basically it was a smooth transition for you.
It was pretty smooth. And again, it was a benefit for the city of Pittsburgh to gain these employees, but a tremendous benefit on the borough of Wilkinsburg, who now has access to 30 fire engines, 11 trucks, and 166 firefighters on duty at one time that can handle a variety of issues at once in that jurisdiction.
Beautiful.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Secura, thank you very much. I next want to call up here just for, if you could just take a couple of minutes, Miss Monica Garcia from the Wilkinsburg School Board. Monica, I'm just looking for, how you feel about this and what how you feel this could happen or can't happen. Okay, so.
Okay. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. I think there hasn't been a lot of discussion about the schools and the children
Right.
in the district of Wilkinsburg and how this would affect them. So I speak on behalf of myself as vice president of the school board and Ed Donovan, the president of the school board. We've come a long way with our schools over the years. We've made lots of financial investments in staff development and in supportive programs for our students. From pre-K, which is free in our district. We also, to sixth grade, we also offer Spanish. So from pre-K on through sixth, we are the best teachers in Pennsylvania, some of the best. Like every district, of course, COVID has hurt us. But the next round of PSSAs, we feel will show that there has been lots of progress in our district. If Wilkinsburg becomes Pittsburgh's next new neighborhood, we want our schools to stay right here, and we want them to continue to be innovative. That is why we were glad to see this analysis being done, showing that PPS could operate our little system, both schools, same staffing levels, same expenses, and still pocket almost up to $1 million net. We are not the same struggling district that PPS rescued 7 years ago with the partnership for our high school kids. We know that was bad. The PPS partnership not only gave our students amazing opportunities, but it allowed us to refocus on our elementary grades and to rebuild them. As a school board, we love our kids, our teachers, and our staff. Our board is hands-on, and we somehow find the money to fund every good idea or new program that they bring to us and still manage to cut taxes twice. We are a solid, secure district with very little debt compared to all other districts in the county. And frankly, out of this whole big annexation discussion, PPS would be lucky to get us. Maybe they'd even see that we're doing some things even better than they are. So bottom line, we have a great little district of 550 kids here, and we love it. We just can't afford it under the current tax rates. Sooner or later, the taxes will crush us and all our hard work could be lost. Annexation could save us without taking anything away from what we have built here. Since we know that PPS could operate our buildings as they are and still have extra cash, what benefits would our students get from annexation? We feel it is our responsibility not just to educate our kids, but to leave them a good community to inherit, not someplace people want to move away from. While the district has improved itself in every measure, the borough government side of Wilkinsburg has failed to turn the ship around. Our population is shrinking every day, as we all know, and there's no plan or vision for growth. But becoming part of Pittsburgh could bring investment here so that when our kids grow up, they won't want to leave this neighborhood. They will be able to buy homes here, get jobs here, raise families here, and yes, send their kids to school here. I think I speak for our entire board when I say we would love to stay an independent little district, But with the borough government failing us year after year, it's so clear that the way for our district to survive and thrive is for Pittsburgh to take it over. We just want them to run it with the same love and respect we do now. As we said in our December resolution, our board really welcomes the chance to sit down and talk about the future with our colleagues at Pittsburgh. We've reached out twice, no answer. It's time for both governments and both districts to get together, look at the financials, look at the opportunities, and get to work planning a great future together.
Thank you, Monica. Appreciate it. I do want to point out that Ira Weiss is here, the solicitor for PPS. And Ira, you'll have a chance to respond. I just want to go to Michael Lamb and go to questions from council right now. Okay. So Michael, if you just want to respond and just tell your thoughts, and then we're going to go right into questions from council. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Michael Lamb. I live in Mount Washington in Teresa Cale Smith's council district. If you didn't know.
And we want to see development on our side of town. That's what
Absolutely.
you're both supposed to say.
So let me just talk a little bit. First off, our office, we've had the chance to review the information that you were presented today. I agree with it. In fact, I would say it leans a little on the conservative side. And I think, as you know, a lot of you know, in dealing with, particularly with PFM, they have that ability, right? That's what they were during our entire time as the Act 47 coordinator. If you look at their projections as to when we could have left distress status, we beat them. We beat that number by years, frankly. And while we didn't leave Act 47 until 2018, I think we all know that we were eligible to leave back in 2013. And so we outperformed their projections. I expect that we will outperform these projections as well. I don't mean that as a criticism by any stretch. I appreciate the conservative view of this, but I actually think that just on a purely financial basis, this is a bigger win than even these numbers would project. And I think that'll be borne out as we continue these conversations, and we'll be able to show why that's true. I do want to say that the fact that we're having this conversation is so much because of the people who sit at this table every day. Never in my lifetime have we had a neighboring borough want to join the city of Pittsburgh. And now we have a large number of the population of our neighboring borough who want to be here. And it's because of the work that this city and particularly this council have done in making the East End so vibrant. And I would say particularly what's happened around East Liberty and a lot of Reverend Burgess's district is what's making that true. The other thing I'll say, and I know that it was discussed earlier, but I want to make this point and make people clear about it. Annexation versus merger. There have been some people who have been proponents of this merger, this annexation, who frankly have been vilified because for suggesting that they're doing an annexation. Well, what we know, frankly, I'm glad that Mr. Zeffie is here to make clear. This isn't just a mechanism to get there. This is the mechanism to get there. When the people of a borough want to join a second-class city, this is the only way. So I know there are issues with the process. I had issues with the process too. We all do. That's why we now have the opportunity to make this process so much better. But the way that some people have reacted to this is troublesome. And I'm glad that we finally got it on the record that this is the way that this works. Now we can blame our statutory construction here in the Commonwealth for that and a lot of other things, but we certainly shouldn't be blaming the residents of Wilkinsburg who have proposed this annexation. The other thing I think is interesting, I hadn't thought about it until we were talking about it today, is the change that this will bring to Wilkinsburg and its business taxes. You know, I don't know how many of you remember what it was like when we in the city of Pittsburgh had a business privilege tax and a mercantile tax. These are taxes not on net, but on gross. So we often had businesses who lost money who still had to pay us taxes, and so paying taxes, business taxes on gross profits or gross revenue rather than on net profits is a big deal. And the fact that they will now pay a tax based on the size of their payroll is a much more manageable situation, particularly for small businesses. Who we've seen in Pittsburgh since we've changed our tax structure have become more vibrant, that sector has done much better than it was before. So I will say, and the last thing that I will address, because it's been raised, is the issue over debt. And you heard a little bit about it today, but Everyone's concerned, oh my gosh, we're going to be taking on the Wilkinsburg School District's debt. So what is that debt? Well, we know now that it's really not that much money, right? As a matter of fact, we know a lot about debt in the city of Pittsburgh because we've been dealing with debt. And we went through the debt cliff back in 2019 and 2018 and what that meant. And here we are now under a situation where we are very, very responsible about debt. And in our 2022 budget, our debt service payment, just the payment of 1 year of debt, is $60 million. That's 3 times the total debt of the Wilkinsburg School District. So for some people who are out there trying to throw red herrings into the mix on this, debt at the school district is not one of the issues. And not only that, they've already identified the revenue within their own budgets to pay that debt. So it really has a very minimal impact on the school district. So I appreciate the conversation today, and certainly I'm looking forward to the ongoing discussions and investigations that we have. And our office will be as available as we can be to help inform the process. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Controller. And I was one of those residents almost moved out of the city because of our business privilege tax that was in effect so long. Good points. I want to thank this council for being very patient. It's a lot of information I was trying to cram into one day, not knowing I was going to have a year to do it. But we are joined by Councilwoman Erica Strasburger. We are joined by Councilman Bobby Wilson, Councilwoman Deb Gross, Councilman Ricky Burgess, and our Madam President, Teresa Kell Smith. I want to just state that for the record. And I do feel obliged to have our solicitor for PPS reply. I feel like,
Your mic is on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, well, I'm not going to repeat everything, but I do feel that Ira Weiss, our solicitor for PPS, should have the opportunity to reply before we get into our questions. Okay, Ira.
Thank you, Councilman Coghill, and thank you to council for inviting me here. I would just identify myself for the meeting. My name is Ira Weiss. I reside at 154 North Belfield Avenue. As Councilman Coghill said, I'm the solicitor for the School District of Pittsburgh and have had a 26-year relationship with the district in various roles as legal counsel. I first want to, and I did provide a written statement, but I learned through the discussion at this meeting that there apparently has been some action to defer a final vote on the annexation for some period of time. So I'm going to revise my comments to some degree, but I want to say, first of all, that it's good that several speakers, including school director from Wilkinsburg, Ms. Garcia, has correctly labeled at least the school district process as an annexation. It is not a merger. A merger is a vote of 2 boards of school directors to enter into an agreement to make one district. This annexation, if it occurs, whenever it occurs, will result in the Wilkinsburg School District ceasing to exist as a district, and it will become part of the School District of Pittsburgh. The report of the Public Financial Management, which was commissioned by the Wilkinsburg CDC, involved no consultation with any representative of the School District of Pittsburgh. School District of Pittsburgh has not even officially received these reports. I received them informally, and I provided them to the district. There are several issues here, and unfortunately, the issues I'm going to raise can be viewed as, quote, naysaying, but details are important. First of all, in taxation and finance, there are a lot of unknowns that require collaboration, consultation, and agreement that would normally take place in a merger, but did not take place this way. These districts have different fiscal years. School District of Pittsburgh has a calendar year. Wilkinsburg School District, like all but one other district in Pennsylvania, has a fiscal year, July 1 to June 30. Why is that important? Well, it's important because these districts levy their taxes at different times. Pittsburgh levied its taxes in December for the next year. Wilkinsburg and all other districts levy their taxes typically in June, take effect for that school year. You can only have one tax levy per year. There is no provision in the code for extending taxing periods or anything like that. And the reports don't address that problem. That is a problem that would have to be worked out. And an annexation, there really is no opportunity to do that. It appears in the annexation provisions that the tax rates in Wilkinsburg School District would become those in Pittsburgh. That is to say, the residents of Wilkinsburg would pay the tax rates in effect for the school district of Pittsburgh. That may be the case, but what is very unclear is the subsidy reimbursement level that was alluded to in your earlier speakers, as well as the charter tuition rate. We believe that Wilkinsburg currently pays a much higher charter tuition rate, particularly for special education students. That has not been analyzed in these reports. I also want to mention that there have been some talk that in the report that the merger process, quote unquote merger process, started with the agreement between the two school districts under which Pittsburgh would educate the Wilkinsburg 7 to 12 students on a tuition basis. That was specifically described as not a merger. It was an agreement to educate students. The Wilkinsburg School District still retains legal responsibility for many aspects of these students' education. So there was no merger process started, and to the extent that the report suggests otherwise, it is incorrect. I was pleased to hear the representative from the Fraternal Order of Police and the representative from the firefighters talk about the impact on the Wilkinsburg employees. This is a major area of concern in this discussion with school districts. When school districts actually merge, that is to say there's an agreement, it is a multi-year process where there's an agreement reached on how collective bargaining agreements are transitioned together, rates of pay, seniority, things like that. The compensation level in the school district of Pittsburgh is much higher at all levels than in Wilkinsburg. In addition, there are 3 bargaining units in Pittsburgh, teachers, paraprofessionals, and technical clerical employees who are basically computer employees. They're in the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers. They each have a new collective bargaining agreement. There are 3 other units in Pittsburgh, the custodial maintenance employees who are represented by AFSCME, the technical clerical employees are represented by AFSCME, and there's a unit of building trades employees. Wilkinsburg has 2 collective bargaining agreements, both represented by the Pennsylvania State Education Association. It is entirely unclear. It is very unclear what happens to those collective bargaining agreements, what happens to those employees. Any assumption that those employees will remain employed is simply conjecture at this point. When the 7 to 12 agreement was reached, there was a specific provision that there was no guarantee of employment for displaced Wilkinsburg teachers or other employees as a result of that agreement. And I recognize that the Wilkinsburg School District has done a wonderful job with the 2 buildings, as was alluded to by Ms. Garcia. The Kelly and Turner schools are fine schools. The district has put a lot of resources into those schools, but any assumption that things will continue as if nothing ever occurred, this annexation occurred, is simply not based in fact. There's been no discussion about that. And an annexation will just simply mean, yes.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump in. I just really want to push this along to get answers from council members.
Well,
You will have ample opportunity, of course, and And just speaking broadly, we want the school district's opinion. We want to see, make sure that it works for PPS. We're all concerned about that. And we're just beginning talks. I just didn't want to have to answer every question right now. And, moving forward, this is a city council. This is on the city council's desk. With all due respect to the school board, they don't
All I'm
come to ask
saying-
us about the taxes, but
Councilman
you got-
Cargill, I'm only asking council, the purpose of my being here is to urge council to consider these factors because the residents of the city of Pittsburgh whose children go to the school district are your constituents as well. And these factors should be considered. This is not a no impact process for the school district of Wilkinsburg or the school district of Pittsburgh. And to assume, I don't want council to assume that if this annexation moves forward, life will continue as it is now in both districts. That is simply not the case. I respect your admonition about time, and I will simply ask council to review my statement and to take it into consideration when you are making your final decision. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off. You will have ample time. We will be going through this throughout the year and, all points will be made and presented to council as we go. So thank you again for your insight. And with that, I will turn it out over to Council President Kell Smith. She has something to say.
Thank you. I just want to remind council first that we have an executive session in 1 hour, so please keep our comments to the point and brief. And I just want to remind you, or explain to and apologize to Solicitor Weiss, Ira Weiss, that I did not have an opportunity to call you in advance, but we did outline today a process that will take place, which does include the school district going forward. So there'll be a lot of times that we're working together and we do care. But I think setting the tone moving forward, I think helping to stop insulting one another, helping to not say things, negative about school districts or our children or anything else moving forward, our police department, our fire department, anything. I think if we set the tone as, we respect one another and we're trying to do what's in the best interest of both the borough of Wilkinsburg and our city of Pittsburgh residents who we were elected to represent. Going forward with that, that's the process I'm going to take. And I hope that others follow suit. But I do think that there's a lot to be said. I have a lot of hesitation when it comes to numbers. I was going to have Dr. Nedley attend today and decided that I'll have her look at the numbers independently and we'll work towards whatever the best interests of our residents are. But I do want to say, I'm going to keep my eye and my comments focused on making sure that whatever happens, we're doing something southwest of the river, because expanding East End is just doing that. It's not doing anything to help southwest of the river. I don't care how many people you put in to the city, you're going to probably lose that many in the southwest if you don't do something on that side of town to start making those residents feel valued and that they're getting something for their tax dollars. They're too close. We border the most boroughs on our side of town. They are too close to other boroughs and they're moving out. We have the largest number of middle-class residents in the city of Pittsburgh, southwest of the river, and we want to keep them there. And the only way you're going to keep them there is starting to put some resources in that side of town as well. So with that said, I'm from the East End, born and raised on Fifth Avenue. I love the East End, but I also love southwest Pittsburgh and the north side, and I want to see things happen there as well. And I'm looking forward to working with everyone in the future on what we can do for the best interest of all of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And I love to hear you fight for southwest of the rivers, as you're such a big advocate for. So thank you so much. And I just want to say before council starts, I don't feel like we have to get every question answered today. Obviously, we're not even, Councilwoman Gross asked me about the source system. We're not even going to get to things like that today. And that's why we wanted to start today. We have a full year to proceed and gather the information. So with that, I will open it up to council. And anybody in particular? Councilwoman Gross, I know you have arrangements later. Would you?
I do
please start?
actually.
Yes.
I appreciate that. So I really don't know that my questions can be answered today, which is why I was supportive of council voting down the current 90-day, petition process for annexation. And I was also supportive of Councilman Burgess's, and I think working with council leadership's plan to do an official council investigation into how this can work, right? As I've said before, There's a variety of things that are required in a merger process that are not required in this annexation process, but the citizens of the city of Pittsburgh and of Wilkinsburg deserve to have those answers in front of them, and we don't have those answers yet. How would the merger of the PWSA water system and the joint municipal Wilkinsburg-Penn water system work if the city is annexing Wilkinsburg, but not Wilkinsburg and Penn Hills? What is the debt load there? What are the pension obligations there? We don't have those numbers. Those numbers are still not in front of us. We have some study of the PPS Wilkinsburg School District annexation. There's still, I think, some soft parts of that analysis, if I'm not mistaken, about what millage is being collected on the properties, on the high version of revenue and the low version of revenue. We don't know. There is no plan in writing for the disposition of existing municipal assets, hard assets and otherwise at Wilkinsburg. There's no plan in front of us for the disposition or liquidation of any debts. And so these are the things that I think we can all put in front of us, and then we can have an intelligent, informed conversation, and not just an emotional one. So I look forward to that process. And I thank the speakers for coming today. This is just an introduction.
Yep.
So I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, Councilwoman Gross. And as Councilwoman Gross said, this is really just the beginning. We have a lot of questions, but with that, Councilman Wilson, do you have any remarks?
Thank you, Councilman, and thank you all, everyone, for coming today. I appreciate all your time. So I did have some questions about the school, because I did get some calls about that the Pittsburgh Public Schools can't take on the debt that the Wilkinsburg schools have. I'm just, after seeing the numbers, I'm curious. I know you were talking previously, Mr. Weiss, but I was just wanting to ask you directly. It looks like there isn't much debt on the school district. So can you respond to that? Like, why this wouldn't be a bad idea for the school district?
It doesn't appear that the debt load is significant. I think it's $1.3 million a year. I do know that from looking at the Wilkinsburg budget, that district had planned for some additional capital improvements in one or the other of these existing schools they have. But from my perspective, at least the comments that I intended to make today, that was not focused on the debt, Councilman Wilson.
So if I had to ask you one takeaway that you want to tell me today, what is that?
The takeaway is that there are a number of unknowns that would result in, if Pittsburgh School District, basically, if Wilkinsburg School District becomes part of Pittsburgh. I've enumerated many of them. There's a transportation issue that I didn't get to, but it's in my written remarks. And I just think we have to have answers to those before this process would move forward. Now, as I said, coming into this, I was assuming that this vote would be imminent and that a yes vote would place us on the ballot this year with this annexation, if approved, occurring in January. It now appears that there's a longer period and these issues could be reviewed, but they are serious issues. They involve the future of, they involve the future of employees in the city schools as well as the Wilkinsburg schools.
You're the solicitor for the school?
For the schools in Pittsburgh, yes.
Yeah. Do they entrust you with the financial, or are you asked to come here to talk about the financials? Like, does the school entrust you to talk about the financials?
There's a chief financial officer. His name is Ronald Joseph. I do not comment on financials, and he doesn't comment on legal matters, and we get along just fine.
He's in control of the school district.
What's that?
He's in control of the school district.
Yeah, so I shall be asking you about, I want to ask about the financials of the school district. I want to be respectful. I guess are you here just for strictly legality purposes of? I'm curious to know why the school district sends you.
Can I jump in there for one
But
second?
he came previously from the school district.
I will say, I invited Mr. Weiss.
Okay.
I just wanted, school board to have some representation here. And Mr. Weiss, I want to apologize to you. I should have called you when we found out that we were going to proceed differently. I understand you came to this meeting probably thinking this is up for a vote Tuesday. And if Pittsburgh advances, you had so many concerns. So I just want to apologize for not informing you of that. We really just got notice in the last couple of days. So that's my fault. Now back to you, Mr.
Yeah, I
Weiss.
don't want to play a gotcha moment. I'm just wondering
No, yeah.
I'm looking over here. I
Let me just say
want to ask
this.
about the financials of the schools. They look pretty well off over there. There's 2 schools that we would acquire, grade schools, right? Because we do middle school and also high school in the city. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, the report that you got today does talk a little bit about the condition of the schools and that information. I will tell you though, that the testimony we heard earlier from Solicitor Weiss, I agree with 100%. There are real issues that we have to find a way to deal with. I think they're solvable issues. And he's right that given that we have time now, they are solvable issues. Just the issue on the fiscal year alone is an issue. I can tell you from our perspective that it is an issue. The issue, I think the biggest issue he mentioned is the integration of the union members, teachers union in the Wilkinsburg district into the Pittsburgh school district. We're talking about 2 different unions, PSEA and PFT. So there's the same issues that police and fire dealt with are there, but they're even amplified because they are significantly more complicated when it comes to teachers unions. So I'm not saying, hey, we're going to do this and everything's great. I'm saying we need to do this and we need to find a way to solve these problems. And I know he didn't get a chance to talk about the transportation issue, and he briefly touched on the special ed funding issue. I'm not suggesting by any way that those aren't issues. They are, but I think they're solvable.
So, I should have started off with you, Tracy, because I should have asked you this. There was a question I had earlier about this, is that if we form this, we're going to take a final vote on in terms of the investigation, the inquiry that we're talking about, about this next year. At the end of that road, since there is one option, and you circulate the petition, or your organization worked to get approximately 8% of the population, was signed onto the petition to, then take that to the judge, take it to us, and then possibly have that on the ballot. Is that process something that you're, if we walk away, in December and we say we're interested in this in this annexation, would you circulate that same petition?
I'm sure it would be again. I mean, we had done it once in the summer and then went back around again in the fall when we were asked to slow down then. Again, we are learning as we go along. Like when we started having conversations about this, we honestly thought that we would be looking at a merger, that the referendum for the government would be a dual referendum, and that the school district would do their own vote. And they could proceed, on their own, regardless of an annexation. My understanding, like Mount Oliver is part of the city school district, but still a separate borough. So the school board could always, school board to school board could vote on their own to engage in a study. And that might be a smart way to move right now if they want more help from the state or looking at these union issues. I know Wilkinsburg School District has taken a vote. They want to have these conversations. They want to see how that looks for them. So that's an option in this process right now. They could start talking on their own if they chose to. So we've been trying to figure out how you do it right, the correct way. And then we did learn that this 1903 annexation was the right way because of Pittsburgh being a second-class city. So certainly aware of all the complexity. A lot of the questions you ask around the infrastructure, buildings, we've been collecting information for over a year. We worked a lot last year with the Peduto administration, talking with Doug Anderson and different budget people. So we have things in spreadsheets and an actual website that we can pull up information. When people say we don't have this information, we actually do have a lot of that information. We just haven't been in a forum or figured out how that gets reviewed or shared or worked on. There is, one elementary school, Kelly, and Monica can probably say better than me. I know they're looking to do around $4 million of repairs, but they also have money right now to do those. And Turner Elementary, 4th through 6th grade, actually just had a $14 million renovation. It is state-of-the-art, beautiful school building. So, ideally, people, just like anyone in their neighborhood, would like to see their neighborhood school stay. Obviously, as it's brought up, that's negotiation that kind of has to take place, and conversations have to, there are a whole list of how this works. It's not, just because it's annexation doesn't mean that you wouldn't still have asset agreements. You'd have to codify ordinances. There's all sorts of legal stuff like that. So it would mostly be with, not you, because you're the county, right? You'd probably be involved.
Okay, but my primary
Yeah,
question was just,
we have a lot of that information. And so this current situation that was introduced by President Smith and Reverend Burgess allows for that. And we think that's, a real win for everybody. So we can have these discussions, we can put people.
yeah, I just want to make sure I get that clear that like we literally would be asking you to go and.
Yeah, we would have to go back out
Okay.
and gather signatures again.
Or any citizen could do
Anybody
that at
could
any
do it.
time.
Anybody could do it, right?
Okay.
it doesn't have
We have the financial people. Well, sorry, I'm trying to be kind.
I don't know if PFM or HR&A are still on.
Okay, so I had a question. If they're
We're all
not,
here.
if Wilkinsburg's not in Act 47 and you're saying the financials look good, what's in it for them?
So what I would say about the Wilkinsburg, I'll speak to the municipal side. What's in it for Wilkinsburg, for the.
Yeah,
for the
they have
residents or
very
for
little
the-
debt. I mean, it looks like a very good, like a good scenario for Pittsburgh, the way you lay it out. And I'm just curious, like what, is it like could their council make a move that would, in terms of property tax or what, is there some other move that they could make that would make it, would help them in the future? Because I know that's one of the big, that's one of the big sticking points is that their property taxes are so high, and you have real estate saying I can't sell houses in Wilkinsburg.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious on that question. Is there actually something internally that you would recommend that you see since you've recommended to, I wasn't on the council, but previous councils, I guess, like your organization was hired during Act 47. Is that's the case, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. So is there something glaring that you see that you would like recommend to them? And let me just state that, in terms of like good governance, I definitely am looking at Allegheny County, grew up with the conversation of we should really, that is Pittsburgh's history. Pittsburgh's, Councilman Coghill was saying, Allegheny City, like a lot of these municipalities, I have maps in my office that, still are the old maps that people have given to me, throughout my life, and that I've kept, and I just I'm fascinated by them because Pittsburgh's history is, it is a history of annexation.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a really good question. Let me say that, as Dean had mentioned at the beginning, when we did the financial analysis, we relied on publicly available documents. So what I know about the Wilkinsburg financial position is what's in their documents, what's in their budget, what's in their audit. I have not met and spoken with their finance director, and I don't want to misrepresent that. Now it sounds like you'll have the time to do that. What I would say I see from looking at their numbers is it's a pretty typical story of a small municipality in Pennsylvania that has a deteriorating tax base and really has very limited options on the revenue side. So Pittsburgh folks will remember this from the early days of Act 47, but this is even more true for municipalities. Wilkinsburg has a set limit amount of earned income tax that they can charge, short of becoming a home rule municipality, which is a whole separate thing, right? They have a limited amount of money that they can spend in their capital budget. If you go back to, when you have a chance, when you go back to the slides, you'll see that the 2022 capital budget for Wilkinsburg has basically no capital investment, right? I'm not saying they're not ever going to pave a road or do anything else, but their ability to invest in capital is extremely limited. And that's not unique. That is common of a lot of different municipalities, both around Pittsburgh and elsewhere. So the question of, well, could they just turn it around on their own? I'm skeptical, is the honest answer.
So,
And on the school side, first of all, I want to echo Controller Lamb's comments about what Solicitor Weiss had to say. I also agree that the issues that he's mentioned are ones that do need to be addressed and can be addressed over this period we've now been granted. And they're not unthorny issues, but I think that we have suggested in our report some ways to address them, and I think there are other people who will have additional ideas, and I think well-intended folks can come together and find a solution to those and hopefully create a package that makes sense for everyone. But in terms of your specific question, I think Ms. Garcia was very clear in speaking on behalf of the board that in the long run, while they have done really a remarkable job that many smaller districts have not done in turning around their own finances in the last 5 years, in the long run, the structure of school finance and municipal finance in Pennsylvania makes it very difficult for small districts to to be successful in the long term without regular significant tax increases, right, and other injections. And I think that they're at a point now where it's, they're financially in a good place, and they can really, the areas where they face more challenges tend to be ones where Pittsburgh has been successful in terms of, maintaining students in the public schools because they have a good alternatives to charter schools, in terms of doing a lot of their special ed supports inside the district in ways that are both more efficient and better for kids. So I think that this is a particularly apt time for them to think about it, and certainly for to take some time to sit down with the Pittsburgh public schools and work through some of the issues that have been raised.
okay. I'm going to end my comments, but and my time for questions here. But I am curious if, similar to Councilwoman Gross, some more of the numbers and how you arrived to them, and what other numbers out there can we see? So specifically, like you mentioned, like they wouldn't have the funds to maintain their roads up to a certain point, investment in their infrastructure. What are the state of their roads? So some of the questions I have, like, did you look into the state of their roads? Did you for that analysis? And then, one second. Then also, like, the cost of a new EMS center, the cost of EMS, because currently EMS is contracted out, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's questions like that. What was that all into your numbers? This nice table here that I have, and I really appreciate that. But I mean, are those everything you factored into?
So my answer to that would be, we did try and take those things into account based on what we know to set you up to have exactly the conversations you're having. So for the EMS, there's an assumption about what the city would add in terms of an EMS unit based roughly on population, right? The number of people you have, the number of chief paramedics and ambulance, and trying to do a per capita ratio. Not because that's exactly the way to do it. You want to staff EMS based on call volume, not based on humans, right? That's the way to do it. But we have set those up so that you can look at the numbers and come back to us and do exactly that. Say, wait, why did you assume this instead of that? And we can tell you, and we can have a conversation about whether those assumptions make sense or not.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And then, to that, it's not numbers, but it's just, in terms of their zoning, like, how do they do zoning? Is it all set, different types of zoning like we have?
So again, it's a lot of complex things. We have a very multi-layered zoning map right now. There's a couple transit overlays, historic district overlay, things like that. We've been working with Danny Puco because I think there would be some sort of change that would be adopted, that it might actually sort of go back and you'd have to then re-adopt different areas. I'd say the zoning's fairly similar. And then we have a lot of information around, like you said, paving, and Borough does a really good job of maintaining, and I have a lot of data on grants and things. Their parks, the borough building, just like the school district, the roads. And this is what we really don't have, is private investment, right? So, we're good at getting grants. people in the borough and school district have been really good at managing government, their functions. What we talked about, like they said, revenue's stagnant because we've had so much property loss. So in some places there's a little bit of growth, but there's so much property loss that it's flat. And then of course your expenses go up every year, your health insurance or whatever.
All right.
So that's the challenge, not so much that the borough and school district haven't maintained and taken good care of what they're responsible for, but it's all of the private investment.
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to,
Yeah,
more
so
questions in the
it's a
future.
lot of
I'll give it up.
Okay.
Yep.
Before we go on to Councilwoman Strasburger and Councilwoman, thank you so much for being so patient. I really appreciate that, and for, wanting to know the facts. And I really appreciate that. But I did, Councilman Wilson, want to introduce you. This is Krista Ross, and she's a Remax real estate agent. I thought you mentioned something about it. If you had any questions about real estate, well, she's here, she's available, and same with, you, Councilwoman, and Mr. Burgess. So. Okay, did you have anything for her, Bobby?
I just want to be mindful. I mean, if you just wanted to say a couple word, a few words about the real estate situation that you're seeing
Yeah.
in Wilkinsburg.
So actually, let me start by answering your question of what's in it for the school district. And this is one of the things that, so as a real estate agent, I work in Wilkinsburg with buyers and sellers. So I hear a lot about what they have to say. I'm not going to talk to you about facts and, all that. This is just sort of what I have conversations with, that people may want to move into the neighborhood, may want to move out of the neighborhood, and what they find. So your question, what's in it for the school district? Well, basically, Wilkinsburg is a shrinking district. They're losing students. They've been losing students for years. And when you have a shrinking area, you have a tax base that's shrinking as well. So these schools are dealing with students in a district that families are not choosing. They won't choose. And when it comes down to real estate, when it comes down to school districts in real estate, the rankings matter, period. Everybody that's looking for a house goes online, greatschools.org. Okay, there it is. There's where the ranking is. And I'm sorry to say that Wilkinsburg still shows up way down at the bottom. So one thing the district gets out of this basically is it immediately becomes part of Pittsburgh Public Schools. Its ranking increases. That gives it a better chance of attracting people to the district.
So our schools aren't that bad.
They're higher ranked. Pittsburgh Public School District actually has a lot of good opportunities for students that Wilkinsburg cannot provide right now. So that's something that would attract parents into that district. And right now, from a real estate standpoint, if you have families that want to come into Wilkinsburg, very many of them, and this is no offense to the people that are working in the district who I know work hard, very many of those parents are looking at it and going, well, if I buy that house, that's great. It's a nice house. And I'm going to pay for private school, or I'm going to send my kids to a charter school because I'm not sending them to Wilkinsburg School District. So something that the Wilkinsburg School District actually gets is it actually gets to be part of a higher ranked school district that parents feel that there are options where they can send their kids. Real estate, the rankings mean something. The other thing that comes down here is just the fact that, like I mentioned, parents are starting to do the math on other options for their kids for school. They also, frankly, have to do the math on taxes. When you're buying a house, the taxes can make more of an impact on your monthly payment than the house. In Wilkinsburg, if you are, the difference between a house with $6,000 a year in taxes and $12,000 a year in taxes is $500 a month. And it's $500 a month that doesn't go to pay down their loan. It doesn't go into their equity. It just goes out the door. They get services, true. But if I go back to the idea about the school district, the same people are saying, why am I paying all this extra money in a school district that I'm not even willing to send my kids to? So that's a hard conversation to have with a buyer. And when you do the math, if I want my mortgage payment to be $1,500 a month, that's the house, that's the taxes, and that's the insurance. So that $6,000 a year in taxes, I can buy a $250,000 house. That $12,000 a year in taxes, Well, I got to bring that down to like $150,000. There's a big difference between those two houses, including the condition when you buy them. So we saddle lower income buyers in with a house that's in worse condition. We may very well be giving them years of repairs that they're going to have to deal with in a district where they're paying a lot of taxes out the door and they're not building their equity. So we have all these people in here, they're not building equity because their houses are in a market that's not appreciating. And they have no incentive to improve the house. So here we are stuck. And it's a circle, it's this loop that keeps going around. And frankly, Wilkinsburg needs to get out of it because Wilkinsburg has so much to offer. And this is actually one of the reasons why I think Pittsburgh really should look at this as a positive. Wilkinsburg has a great location. It is the gateway from the suburbs into the city. We have traffic flow every day that businesses can capitalize on. We have, frankly, a beautiful downtown. The architecture in Wilkinsburg is lovely, and it is that walkable business district that developers go out in the suburbs and try and build because this is our ideal America. And yet it's sitting there waiting to be revitalized. It's adjacent to Frick Park. It's adjacent to all these jobs. It has tons of potential, but it needs to be unlocked. And part of that is the math has to work. People have to say, I'm willing to move in here because I can buy the same house here that I can buy over in that neighborhood. My taxes are going to be the same. I get that same district. That's what's in it for the school district. That's what's in it for the municipality.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments.
Yep. And Krista, thank you. I think a real estate perspective is very important in this. I see that as the number one thing, the lack of people wanting to invest. When I see 20% plus abandoned buildings, that says it all. So with that, I'd like to go to Councilwoman Erica Strasburger, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate everyone who has spoken and who's here today. And thanks to you and Council President and really everyone who was part of making sure that we had the full time that we needed to consider all the facts, gather more data, and consider all of those as well. I had the great fortune, I guess, of being part of the trunk sewer consolidation conversations a couple of years ago. And that was complex for different reasons. It was like all the municipalities in Allegheny County trying to consolidate their sewer lines, but not as many issues to cover as we are here. And that took like 2 years of conversations with lawyers and engineers and working through every little detail. So I have no doubt that it's going to take the same kind of attention for this, which takes time. I guess one question I have is, and this is for Ralph, but he's no longer here, and I'm sure we can follow up with him. But I'm curious what the numbers look like when they did merge the fire departments. And I don't know, did Mr. Schwartzwalder? Okay, I'd love to hear any kind of take that you have on that, because what it sounds like, the reason I ask is it sounds like the financial numbers assume that all of the employees come over to Pittsburgh. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but it seems like maybe we need to account for some attrition based on, if one bargaining unit says you're at the bottom rank because of seniority, it's only 54%, pension, just to use that as a model. That might mean some of them choose to leave and go somewhere else. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it seems like we need to recrunch those numbers again once we know that. But I'd be curious to know if you know anything about
Why don't you step up to the mic, please?
just what happened with some of the fire.
Very briefly, because I know a lot because I conversed with him about this on the police side, because I knew they did it. The valuation of the pension was critical in that merger. In other words, Wilkinsburg Fire's pension wasn't as substantial as the Pittsburgh Fire pension. So what happened was that's where they bought in at 54%. So they got a lot of their years, but they didn't get year for year because they just couldn't purchase into it. Where on the police side, if you would do a comparison, Wilkinsburg Police pension is better than Pittsburgh Police pension. So they would be able to buy more years. So some did leave, and actually some from the Wilkinsburg Fire Department have since retired from the Pittsburgh Bureau of Fire. So neither municipality lost any money. In other words, the valuations of the pensions were done based on the total valuation of each individual firefighter's pension that came over. So it benefited both Wilkinsburg's pension system and the city of Pittsburgh pension system. And that's as far as I really want to take it.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you. I
sure.
appreciate it.
Well, I was on Borough Council during that time, and I know that out of, was it 26? 26, say, or 24 firefighters, all but one chose to come over to the city. One retired.
Okay.
So yeah, people were really, there were a lot of benefits in terms of being able to move up, better, days off, all sorts of things that they did like. So it was a pretty successful, and you're correct. In the analysis, we are looking at almost every employee having the opportunity to be hired if they want to, except for maybe a few like administrative jobs that would be duplicative. But we want to make sure people have the opportunity, we think is the best choice. And there would probably be people who might say, I don't want to, I'm ready to retire. You're right. So we'd get better numbers once people started having those conversations.
Yeah, and I raise it only because I want to make sure that we're working off of the numbers when we're at the point where we know a little bit more, but we might not know it until we're there. So I understand that's difficult to do, but hopefully that doesn't change the calculation too much or the analysis too much. That was really the only question I have. The only thing I guess I can phrase in the form of a question is, it would be really nice through this process to either have the participation or the technical support from, I don't know if you can speak to this, Solicitor Zeffie, but from county and maybe state economic development departments and state education department to be able to help guide us or give us some technical support to the extent that they can. I think we are forging this sort of new path and getting around the restrictions that prevent us from using the Mergers and Consolidation Act. And that's exciting. I mean, we're really we're sidestepping that in a way, but in the end, we still have to go through the annexation process. And so we're doing some work here. We're going through this process, and it seems like at the end of it, we should come together and lobby the state to change the law to allow second class and other municipalities to do this in a different way in the future, so that at the end of some sort of a merger process, it really truly is a merger rather than an annexation. Do you happen to know if that would be a matter of just state legislature changing their code, changing their law? Or?
Yeah, that is exactly what it would take.
Okay,
You-
okay.
It can be done. It would have to be done through legislation. I will say that the issues don't go away. Merger versus annexation, all the things we're talking about with unions coming together, those are all the same, whether it's a merger or annexation. You still have all that stuff. So, but yes, it's a matter of changing the state law.
If I'm thinking ahead to, the talks around more consolidation around the county, seems like it would be an easier lift if they knew at the end of it, they didn't also then have to collect the ballot petition signatures and take it to a vote and all those different things.
That is only to come into the city.
Mhm.
Two municipalities outside the city wanted to merge, they can do that through the merger process.
Oh, so it's really just second
Just to-
class city.
Yes, it's just to come into the city. That the
Got it.
annexation
I always
process
assume
is
it's second class and below, but it's in this case, it's just. second
literally just Philly and Pittsburgh.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Still would be interested in changing that law in the future if we can come together and lobby the state legislators on that. That's really all I had to say. I think this is the right process. I'm grateful to everyone for their work on this. And I know we're going to be, just really beginning the work now.
Yep. Thank you, Councilwoman. And poor Tracy, too bad you couldn't have got 3 signatures the first time around, as far as the petition goes. So you'll be out there again probably this fall, but the process is.
I have to be honest, I collected about 6 myself, so.
Okay. Yeah. You got. a lot
I
of
really
good
didn't do
volunteers.
very much. We had volunteers,
Right, right.
29, 30 residents who went
Right,
out and got
right.
these signatures.
Great.
So
Yep,
yeah,
that's
thank
good,
them, not
right.
me.
So, I want to close it out. First of all, I just want to say on a personal note, thank you to all the guests. But I'm going to turn it over to the star of the show today. All right. The guy who really is forwarding this process where everybody can deal with it. And that's Mr. Reverend Burgess.
So I won't be long, the hour is late. I want to thank everybody who participated. Ms. Garcia, did I get it right? Thank you for participating, all those who are here. Thank you for your leadership. I do have to give 2 shouts out, and then I'll ask one question. One shout out is to Ira Weiss. Ira Weiss is the most thoughtful, insightful, and wise municipal attorney I've ever met, certainly in this region. And I wanted to say publicly, Ira, I thank you for your leadership. I thank you for your service and for your years of knowledge and for your friendship. God bless you. Thank you for being here. I love you very much. Second of all, Dean, it's good to see you. I can't say I miss you. We spent multiple years together. I won't say, I don't, how do we call it, Dean? In mutually, I guess, interesting conversations. I don't know how we phrase them. When they were the Act 47 coordinators, right? We weren't allowed to do much without their approval. And so there was always this push and pull. But I will say, without Dean in many ways directly, not just his firm, Dean himself was, for the most part, I mean, I think Mr. Roberts, am I right? Am I right about that name?
And Mr. Mann is with me today. Yeah.
Yes, they were really the architects of our recovery. Without them, we would be in really bad shape instead of this place we are now. So Dean, I thank you very much for what you've done for our city and how you've taught me to understand some of this future forecasting and debt cliff. All that stuff happened when I was finance chair the first time and with Dean. I do have a question though, Dean, just so I get this. So at this right now, who is your client? Is the Wilkinsburg CDC the client? Who's your client?
Yes, Wilkinsburg CDC.
So is there a world, and maybe I should ask this off camera, but I don't know about conflict of interest, but I know you guys know our finances. I know that, right? You know the city of Pittsburgh's finances, and you've done, is there a world in which the council perhaps could hire you to be we have to go through this, but is there a world where we could either on their grant or somehow get you to, we're going to need someone to be the collector of the financial data that we're going to gather during our 6 months inquiry. And so using this as a base will acquire more information. It just seems to me easier to use you as a base and then layer on the other data that we come up with. Is there a world where in some collective collaborative way that can happen?
I can't imagine that. I can imagine there must be a way to do that. I think that, as you've seen today, there are a number of folks who have very important roles in this. So Ron Joseph and Ira Weiss from the school district, the Controller Lamb and others on the city side. We're happy to play whatever role the parties agree would be helpful in doing that, and happy to discuss it.
It's just because I know you, and I know you know the city's finances intimately in ways that few others do. And so we'll talk more about that. I just want to thank you for sticking around, both of you for being around so long with us. It's been a full day, and I just appreciate the moment. I will say, I will push back on one thing. I've been not saying this all day. I've been trying not to say it. It is explicitly untrue that poor communities are competing for dollars. That thought is wrong. And it is unfortunately, I don't want to hit it, I'm trying not to say it real hard, but it is born in many ways out of racism, that poor communities only deserve money that's given to them in a small pot, and that's just for the Black folk. Really, all low and middle class communities are really competing against Squirrel Hill, Shadyside, Southside Flat, and Oakland. Those are the places that are disproportionately getting the resources. The poor communities are not at all competing against each other. We're all competing against the wealthy communities because those dollars are not being invested in poor communities. And if you want poor communities to flourish, that has to be in partnership with more affluent communities. It is never, ever going, poor communities are never going to ever make other poor communities better. That's not how it works. It is middle class and and stable communities that partner with poor communities. That, and in the case I'm going to make in our city, the best example is Larmer. The only reason that you've seen the rebirth of Larmer is because of its proximity to East Liberty. If there wasn't East Liberty, Larmer would have never occurred. When we've got the, $300 million stuff, 30 million from the government, did about $300 million of development in Larmer. When HUD came, they didn't even come to Larmer at first. They went to Google and East Liberty, and they looked at Shadyside first. They looked at East Liberty first and said, if we put this money in the Larmer, these residents can walk to these amenities, well, let's invest in Larmer. And so I do this work, and so I try not to say it all the time, but it's really the money in Pittsburgh is disproportionately invested in wealthy, segregated communities. That's who we are competing against. We're competing against that private dollar. Public, we've done, if you look at our records, the city of Pittsburgh's done remarkable over the last 10 years of investing in poor communities. The competition is, how do we get the Shadyside investment? How do we get the Oakland investment? How do we get the Southside Flats investment? How do we get those very wealthy bank investments that are targeted for segregated, affluent communities to be invested in emerging and communities of potential? And if hopefully, I mean, that's my little diatribe. I don't say it often, and I listen to people say it, but they just misunderstand how this works. Bell Suver and Homewood are not competing for dollars. They're just not, right? They're not competing for dollars. And then the view it that way is not true. And both of them can be successful at the same time with probably different strategies, but neither one of them have to suffer because they're both poor. And Wilkinsburg coming into the city will not ever really directly make other poor communities in Pittsburgh better or worse off. It just doesn't work that way. And that's my last speech. I listened to it most of the day. I didn't say anything until today. I had to say something. It's just not how it's not how those of us who know how economic development works, it doesn't work that way. So.
Thank you, Reverend Burgess. Councilman Wilson.
Well, I don't know if we could play off each other here, but I'm curious. What's the vacant abandoned property issue like in Wilkinsburg? It's high. Right now,
I believe. Okay.
Right now, we got the county, we got the city, we got the school board online. And these are literally the entities, the three taxing bodies that could solve a lot together. And so, like, I know I'm interested in being on the land bank, and the county's on board to waive liens. The city's on board to waive liens. And we're asking the school board, or we've been trying to work with the school board on waiving liens so that we can move properties faster. And this is part of a larger conversation if Wilkinsburg can actually be a part of that. That's the conversation I'm interested in. I would love to, continue this conversation with Mr. Weiss and to hear the school board out in terms of if they could get on board waiving liens so that we can all be a part of this solving of this recycling tool to actually improve lives for people that live next to vacant abandoned property. I said this earlier, and I'm just going to say it here for the record. It's probably plaguing Wilkinsburg as much as us. So we got all the entities here that we could really work together to solve that problem. I'm not sure if you agree with that, Councilman, but yeah. So hopefully, that could be a larger conversation if it's the right move in terms of like involving Wilkinsburg in that conversation. So, all right, thanks.
No, thank you. Mr. Weiss, anybody else you want to respond to that, Mr. Weiss, or?
Well, briefly, we do have regular conversations with the city principally about waiving tax liens, and we've been having conversations with the Urban Redevelopment Authority about restructuring the land bank so as to give the school district representation and making that a more robust process. And we're ready to do that now that the new administration is in place. So we are ready to talk to whomever would like to have that conversation.
Councilman Wilson, thank you for bringing that up. I want to be involved with the land bank. I want to be involved with that with you. I asked to be on the board. We'll see. We'll figure that out some point, but so anybody else have anything they want to add or any questions to sum this up for today? Okay, so listen, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody to come into a consensus as to how we're going to move forward. Obviously, we see it's a lot of information to digest, and we have a long way to go. I'm going to encourage other council members, whether it's Mr. Wilson about what he was just talking about or other council members, to have post agendas throughout the year. I think we need at least 3 more or 4, as many as it takes, I think. So I want to thank Mr. Weiss. Again, I apologize. I didn't fill you in on exactly what transpired in the last day or 2 and wasn't really certain until today. So I think you came here with, a different frame of mind, and that's my fault. So I apologize for that. I want to thank all of our guests as to what they added and what they're going to add, and we will be seeing you again. And for now, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.